to just play it. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40! Can't wait! Let's go!
What is going on, guys? It is your boy, Guardy3, and welcome back to the And One podcast. Of course, we got my boy, got Mo Betta. He's here every week. We always love talking hoops with Mo. Mo, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. Just ready to get started.
And of course, below me, we have the Prince of Production himself, resident Boston Celtics fan, Kyle Edwards, baby. Kyle, how you doing?
Hey, man, I'm good. You know, was on here a few weeks ago, had to come back on. So, I'm always ready to talk some NBA.
Well, Kyle, we always love having you on.
No doubt.
And, of course, we all know how we always start every week, so I say we get right into it. We always start talking about those underrated players. We like showing love to people who don't get enough love. So, let's start with you, Mo. Did you have an underrated player this week?
I think my underrated player is going to be Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones started his career with my Lakers. He spent more prominent years with the Hornets. He went on to become a member of the Heat. I think Eddie, he's not the first version of a true 3-and-D player, but I think if you look at his career, you look at his skill set, his type, I guess you want to say his blueprint, he is the typical 3D guy, right? Long, athletic, wing, can shoot the three, can guard multiple positions. I think Eddie made 3 All-Star teams, multiple All-NBA defensive teams. And even though he was in the early stages of the three-point boom, Eddie gave you a good sample size. I think for his career, he shot just below 40% from 3. So I would say Eddie Jones is my underrated player this week.
I think that's a great answer. Like, there's a reason Kobe didn't get to start right away, and it was because Eddie Jones was playing at such a high level that it took him a couple of years to finally really unseat him.
You know what? That's a great point. And don't forget, Kobe's second year, all 4 of those guys made the All-Star game. Shaq, Van Exel, Eddie, and Kobe as a 6th man.
Whew. Love Nick Van Exel. All right, Kyle, you got anybody for this week?
Yeah, it's actually somebody I was thinking about who's currently playing in the game, because I know normally you guys go back in the day, which is always good because some fans today just don't know about how great some players were. But I find myself really, entertained when I watch Jalen Williams in Oklahoma City.
He's nice.
I think he's a guy who's really come on this season. A lot of people look at Chet, SGA, but a lot of late game situations, Jalen Williams is the guy who's taking those shots. He gets to his spot, and he more often than not, he's knocking them down. And I just feel like with his ability, defensively and kind of this new NBA, I think he's a guy who's going to blow up in this league really soon.
Yeah. I think that's a great choice. I actually agree with Kyle. I think Jalen Williams is going to be an all-star. If you look at him, really look at him, guys, he is deceptively long. He's got like really, really long arms. He's improved on his handle. And if you look at their shooting splits, there's no controversy. We know Shea is their best player, but Jalen Williams is actually shooting the ball better than Shea is. Like, Jalen Williams is a bad man.
Yeah, Jalen Williams is not scared of the moment, and that dude has an insanely high ceiling. It's crazy that when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, they haven't had to trade their picks because they've been so good at hitting on these picks that they haven't even found a need to consolidate them for more talent yet. Like, their drafting is just so insane these past few years. And, of course, shout out to Daniel Barry Sports Highlights in the chat. Jory.
Appreciate you, Daniel.
Wire to Wire. Appreciate y'all. Hope y'all are doing well tonight. And my underrated player this week, I was thinking about defense this week. And I'm trying to think of an absolute game wrecker on defense, and someone that came to mind, Andre Roberson of the Oklahoma City Thunder from the mid-2010s.
I remember him.
Could he score? No.
No.
But holy cow, his impact was almost the equivalent of like a 15-game score because he was absolutely putting the clamps on everyone. And if you were matched up against him, you were shooting well below your percentages. So I think a lot of people underestimate that even though he didn't, he wasn't a 15 to 20 a game scorer, he had the impact of one. Just from what he could give you on offense, he was a timely slasher. And he did get hot from three in that one playoff game, but he was active. He would move. He'd set picks. He would cut to the basket. And the elite defense that he provided, give me Andre Roberson for my underrated player of the week.
That's a good choice. Really good player, good athlete, versatile defender. I think he was one of the last, I guess you call it, primarily defensive players, because the league has a way of adjusting. So you had a guy like Tony Allen before him, and then the league kind of readjusted and said, if you can't shoot at range, we can make you pay in the other end because we can double off you. Roberson was the same way. Hell of a defender. And at first, people didn't know how to really deal with him. And then they realized, like a non-shooter, they started doubling off him. Even with the cutting, he became a liability at times. So I think it's a great choice. But when the league shifted again, then you had to become a defender who could also make timely shots, right? So that's the great thing about the NBA. Every time players adjust, the league, the game itself, it readjusts all over again.
Yeah, he wasn't somebody that was going to stick around for the long haul unless he fixed that jumper of his, and unfortunately, it never happened. Then he suffered that devastating, I think it was like a pectoral injury that kind of just ended his career at that point. And speaking of career unders, man, the Milwaukee Bucks title.
That's a good segue. Career enders.
Ladies and gentlemen, the doctor is in. Doc Rivers is the new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm gonna let you guys go first on this one. I'll go last. I gotta kind of.
You know what? I'm gonna let Kyle go. Kyle go first because Kyle is obviously a lifetime Celtic fan. He's probably got more of a connection to Doc and more insight on Doc. So I'll step back and respect what Kyle's got to say about Doc.
I mean, look, the whole situation is just weird to me. Like, Adrian Griffin was tabbed as the guy in the offseason. That's who Giannis wanted. I just think it's weird that in 40-something games, he went from the guy to the guy they need to get rid of quickly. And if they wanted Doc Rivers so much, why didn't they just hire him to begin with? Not like he was on somebody's team and you had to wait for him to get released or something like that. He was out there and available. And look, are the Bucks the type of team that Doc Rivers loves? Yes. Veterans don't really have to worry about too many young players to work in the rotation because Doc doesn't want that. Doc loves commodities that he knows about as opposed to finding out by putting a young player in a situation and them failing. He doesn't like any of that. So, if this turns around the Bucks season, more power to him. I mean, Adrian Griffin was not the only issue the Bucks have, obviously. And they were 30-13. Like, the way they're talking about Adrian Griffin, you would think they were the Pistons and Monty Williams. Like, they were still winning games. It's just that apparently behind the scenes, they didn't like him. And you would think in the interview process, they kind of would have understood what kind of person he was and whether or not that would fit with their locker room dynamic. So that's why this whole thing, something about it just doesn't sit right. And maybe that's because as a Celtics fan, I saw Joe Mazzulla go through this last season. Everybody questioned everything he did. Didn't think he was good enough. And the team, what did they do? Brad Stevens got good assistance in this past offseason to make him a better coach. And look at the Celtics now. They're still a top team in the East. Yeah, some people still question Joe Mazzulla, but I just feel like it's kind of premature to write the book on Adrian Griffin after 40 games. just because what? Maybe he rubbed the Nasus the wrong way. Maybe he didn't see eye to eye with Dame Lillard. Like, Adrian Griffin wants teams to play defense. Look, you gave up Drew Holiday for Dame Lillard. You were automatically going to lose that battle at the point of attack. So if he was trying to come up with a new situation to fix the defense and players didn't like it, then maybe it's better off Adrian Griffin doesn't stay there. Because he would just have been the story all season. And for a first-time head coach, you don't need that attached to you.
I think that I'm where you're at on this, Kyle, because Giannis couldn't wait to get rid of Bud. You know what I'm saying? He was ready. He couldn't wait to get rid of Bud, who you had won championships with, who you'd been title contenders with, and you can say, hey, Bud was a little resistant to change and making adjustments in his system. That's a fair criticism, but Giannis went out of his way to cake up for Adrian Griffin. That was Giannis's dude. And my thing is, if you pick a guy, like you said, I need to know more than you seem really cool. I need to get to know you, get to know your vision and how you want to coach the team, how you want to develop the team to bring some kind of cohesiveness to the unit. And it's weird, right? Because I was thinking, if you're a rookie coach, never mind Adrian Griffin is a rookie coach, but he's been in the league for a while. We're talking about a guy who's probably in his mid to late 40s. But if you're a 25-year-old rookie coach, in 43 games into the season, you were 30-13, they'd be talking about you being coach of the year. The Bucks have the second best record in all the NBA. Like, if they were in the Western Conference, there'd be a three-way tie at the top of the West. That's what their record is. The only team that's got a better record are your Celtics, Kyle. And we can talk about the defense, but the problem with the defense isn't just the coach. You could have Pat Riley, Phil Jackson. I don't care who the coach is. The personnel is still the same. And I think Adrian Griffin wanted them to play more of an aggressive style of defense. If he's at fault, he's trying to get an old, slow team to play an aggressive style of defense. I've said this to Brett a few times. Maybe you guys have heard of me saying this in the morning show. If you look at Milwaukee's roster, top to bottom, they are the most unathletic. They are the most unathletic team in the NBA. The only guy that you would look at on that roster and call an athlete is Giannis. That's the only one. Yep. Everybody else is either undersized, in their mid-30s and slow. Jay Crowder, slow of foot. Brooke Lopez, slow of foot. I like Bobby Portis, still slow of foot. They're a slow, old, unathletic team. Middleton's back, but he's a lesser version of himself. He's slower, not quite what he was. He used to be a very good defender. So you can bring in Doc, and there may very well be a honeymoon period where like, we got Doc now. But if you bring in Doc and you're winning at the same clip as you were with Adrian Griffin, and in the bigger picture, when you get to the playoffs, the only way Doc makes an impact is if you win it all. If you don't win it all, what I'm going to remember is you wasn't going to win it all with Adrian Griffin either. Like what's the difference? Unless you make some timely moves to put some young, more athletic legs on your roster. If nothing else, bring in a guy who at the point of attack, maybe he comes off the bench and he's more of a defender. Maybe he's in your closing lineup because he's such a good defender. But I think this move it's not a bad move because of Doc. I think it was handled bad because to me, it feels more like Adrian Griffin got fired because they didn't like him. Like it's more of a personality thing. It's more of a personal thing. Like you started hearing all these stories about what he was bullying my brother and saying my brother wasn't good enough to be in the league. Look, if he was actually bullying Thanasis, then Adrian Griffin is wrong for that. If he's pointing out that Thanasis is only in the NBA because of Giannis, well, that's the damn truth. That's the damn truth. There's not a team in the NBA that's trading for Thanasis or asking for his services. If he ever hits free agency, you know where he'll be after free agency? He'll still be a free agent. So it's not like Adrian Griffin told any lies about what Thanasis is. Thanasis has a job because of who his brother is. And we all know this. I just think that for an organization that for years had this reputation of being top shelf, the way this was handled overall, it's not just a bad look. It just seems kind of shisty. It feels almost anticlimactic. I feel like in the news they go they're talking to Doc Rivers, and yet my gut feeling is I feel like they were already talking to Doc Rivers. I feel like Doc was going to be the coach before it was announced he was going to be the coach. So I guess the way I look at it is you better win the title, because if you don't win the title and you're not happy with Doc, are you going to try to move on to another coach? Because that's a bad look. Because if you move on to another coach, you're going to start looking a lot like LeBron.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I was about to say. Giannis was the likable superstar,
right?
And this almost seems like the Bucks are trying to become an unlikable team because from the outside looking in, it definitely seems like Adrian Griffin got a raw deal in all this. And like maybe he isn't a good coach, fine, but to give him 43 games with a second best record in the league and then make it seem like he's somehow holding you back, that's just a poor look. And hey, if Doc fixes that, sure, but I just don't like the fact that it's going to be seen as like Adrian Griffin failed as a coach because of this. It's like, no, the players, maybe some of them are just immature about hearing the truth. And that whole dancing around that they did last night after the game when they won, also a bad look.
That was
now
horrible. That was
they're
horrible.
really trying to make it seem like Adrian Griffin's like this big bad man, and they finally got away from him. Now they can all have fun again. It's like, come on.
And they're telling 5 different stories. Giannis is in the one interview, and Giannis is like, I was surprised that he get fired because I thought he was doing a good job. You didn't think he was doing a good job. He was one of the main ones that wanted him out of there. Like which version is true? Dame said, "Well, I wasn't even there." Then there's some video showing Dame was there. Like they're all lying. Like clearly on a personal level, we can talk about X's and O's, but on a personal level, they didn't like this man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny that you touched on it about Doc. You know, there's a saying, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is making people believe he didn't exist. Guess what? A report came out. Who's been advising and helping Adrian Griffin? Doc Rivers. He's been reaching out to Doc, and he's been getting advice. Well, guess what? It's maybe Doc's been reaching out to other people and putting the idea in his head that, hey, I'm really pushing this guy. Maybe I should be the head coach.
Doc kicked his back in. Oh, no.
I think so. Doc, I think, really behind Adrian Griffin's back, probably had a little part in this too. I just think the Milwaukee Bucks butchered this entire thing, and it's turned into an absolute joke. And I hate to say it because they're my team, but you knew Adrian Griffin, who he was. You had to interview him. You had to get that all out of the way in the offseason. And now you're telling me that you're surprised at the kind of person he is? Right. This made it seem like they didn't have a plan when they fired Bud. They just fired him because somebody, like maybe Giannis or everybody, wanted him gone, and then we'll figure out the rest later. Well, you messed up the rest of it later, unfortunately, because you hired Griffin. Apparently, you had like a 5-minute sit-down, and then we're like, yeah, that's good enough. Hired him, and then they're surprised by the kind of person he is? This is a terrible look. This is terrible by Milwaukee. It's an absolute joke. And, I'll still hope for Milwaukee and their success, but at the same time, it's a bad look. You know, and as much as I love Giannis, you know he's lying. You know Dame's lying. You know for a fact that they knew that this was coming. And now let's get to the actual Doc Rivers. I think Doc Rivers does do some things well. I'm not saying he's a completely terrible coach. I think he does. I think he communicates with the staff well. He sets expectations. He has a scheme. The issue with Doc Rivers is once you get into the nitty-gritty X's and O's adjustments, as soon as you get him into a 7-game playoff series, he's going to get outcoached. We've seen it pretty much every year. Look at the Clippers in 2020. The Nuggets came back 3-1 on them, And he couldn't do something as simple as realize they were absolutely just getting barbecued in Montrezl Harrell minutes and lessen his minutes. We go to Philly. He couldn't get the job done there. You look at Boston. He couldn't get the job done there. He got it done.
Won a title there.
He got out of it in 2008. My apologies. I got a little ahead of myself with that one. But at the end of the day, it's wanted to get rid of Bud. You're so excited to get rid of Bud just to hire somebody who can't make adjustments in the playoffs. Who did we complain about that couldn't make adjustments in the playoff? Coach Bud. You literally just hired the more hyped version of Coach Bud. And now we are going to absolutely suffer for it when it comes to that time. Because when he does match up against Spoelstra, Nick Nurse, we're cooked. We're cooked in the terms of coaching. I think we could still win those series, but we're going to have to carry the coach because he's not out coaching any of them. So the Bucks butchered this. This was not a great signing. This does nothing to raise our playoff ceiling. I think it raises our floor a little bit, but I'm not looking for a floor raiser. I'm looking for a ceiling raiser, and Doc Rivers is not it.
To be fair, I don't think Doc built his resume as an X's and O coach. I think what Doc has always been gifted at is he's a great communicator, he's a great motivator, and he has a way of creating relationships with his players. Like Kyle said, Doc he's much more comfortable with the known, with veteran players, with established players. He's got a gift for dealing with guys like that and their egos. He can make them more accountable for themselves. Now, if you want to get into adjustments and stuff, yeah, I never thought that was his strength. But I don't want anybody that's listening to the show come away thinking, I don't think Doc Rivers is a good coach. He's been a good coach for many, many years. I just think that if we're doing upgrades or not upgrades, if you go from Bud to Doc, I don't think that's an upgrade. I think they're either the same or Bud might even be slightly better. So I go back to what Brett said. Giannis and company were so hell-bent on getting rid of Bud, I don't think it really mattered who the replacement was. Matter of fact, I don't think Giannis thought it mattered. I think that's why Giannis picked Adrian Griffin. If we want to really be 100% and be real, I think Giannis picked Adrian Griffin because I think that he thought he could boss him around the way LeBron bosses around his lesser coaches, the way they cater to LeBron. LeBron doesn't. If you look at some of the coaches that LeBron has had, they've always been coaches who have, compared to LeBron, they're less accomplished, right? So LeBron ultimately has the last say. Giannis has always had this great Teflon reputation, like Kyle pointed out, but I think we're finding out more and more he's not nearly as likable as he feels his mortality growing. Giannis is 29 years old, and what he wants to do more than anything is win multiple championships. He got rid of Bud thinking, you can put any guy in here. If you put the right talent around me, I'll win a title. He thought if you bring me Dame, I got this, no matter who the coach is. And now he's learning the hard way. Who your coach is matters. And the players should be accountable. The fact that they went from 4th in the NBA in defense to in the 20s, that's not just about coaching. That's about the players. That's about the roster construction. You want to kill Adrian Griffin, that's fine. Maybe he's too plain spoken. Maybe he's too direct. Maybe he's too old school. And they don't want to hear that. Maybe if you want to kill somebody, kill your general manager. He's the one to put this roster together. And this is an old roster. And if you don't win this year, guess what? This is going to be an even older roster next year. So I think you bring Doc in. I think there is a honeymoon period. But ultimately, the goal is to win a title. I don't want to be the guy that's way early into predicting final results. But I don't think the Bucks are going to win the title this year.
So Gene asked, is he a good coach or does he coach on a team with good players? I think he's a good coach in the sense of getting you through the grind of an 82-game regular season. I think in that regard, I think he does well. I do think he does connections. Now, I think it really falls apart after that. like I said, my issue is you've seen him in the huddle. This guy can't hype anybody up to save his life. He can't really coach anybody up to save his life is the issue. We've seen and heard that. Anytime he's mic'd up, it's the most brutal, like painstaking thing I think I've ever heard. We gotta play the game, guys. We gotta play the game. You can pay me less than he's making, and I can tell him the same thing. I promise you. Like, that's the frustrating part. He doesn't coach anybody up when it matters. Like, I'm glad Doc Rivers can have good-looking teams in the regular season. Let's get to the postseason. What's a team that, and I think Gene's right in that regard, like, when it matters, he can't coach these guys up to perform at the level that they're expected to, and that's kind of where I run into issues with Doc.
Oh, I'm not hate. Look, that criticism to me is fair.
Yeah.
But to me, if they don't win it all, if they come up short, yes, Doc is going to take some heat, but he shouldn't take any more heat than Dame or Giannis. You wanted Bud gone, then you wanted Adrian Griffin gone. This is your third coach, bro. Within 2 seasons, this is your third coach. And if it doesn't work with Doc, we can't all point the finger at Doc. I'm pointing the finger at Giannis and Dame. They better find a way to make it work, because if they come up short, they're going to take a lot of heat.
Oh, I agree.
And also,
go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say that if you look at the 08 Celtics team, that team was known for their defense, right? He had Tom Thibodeau on that staff. And everybody said Tom Thibodeau is basically your defensive coordinator.
That's what he was,
so
100%.
It wasn't even like Doc had his hand in that either. So, and like Mo said, because most Bucks fans would probably say that they won that title in spite of Bud. So basically Giannis did his thing and got him the title. So the same thing has to work the other way. If they come up short, then we have to say Giannis, Dame didn't get done. And like Gene said, I'm not a big Dame guy anyway. I thought the Holiday Dame substitution was a downgrade for this very reason. And I get it that Milwaukee wanted to improve offensively, but they were doing just fine. They should have looked at other areas. You know, Middleton and him slowing down on the wing, that's a big issue. And Brook Lopez, I get he's been in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, but the way this new NBA is, a guy like him's going to get exposed most nights defensively because they're going to pull him away from the basket and he can't move to cover, you know, like a Chet or like Alperen Sengun. You want Lopez out in the perimeter trying to cover him, he'll eat him alive. So I feel like the Bucks are just hanging on to this group for a year too long as opposed to modernizing to keep up with the East as it is.
That's a great point. Don't forget, Brook Lopez struggles with Miles Turner. When Miles Turner plays Brook Lopez, Miles Turner blows up versus Brook Lopez. So I'm with Kyle. If you're not going to adjust to this new NBA where the floor is spaced like that, if Brook Lopez tries to get away with playing that drop coverage, they're going to keep getting eaten alive.
What's poppin', Gene?
What's happening, y'all? So the only reason I want to hop on is I understand that. So Mo, you said something earlier. You said Doc is a good coach, but I cannot point to an area in his career. I think Doc can be a serviceable coach. I can't call him a good coach. I don't call him a Hall of Fame coach. I think he's the most overrated coach in NBA history. As far as they look at him as a top 5 or top 10 coach.
They do. And I agree with you.
My question is this, and I'll ask all three of you guys. Can you point at a good coaching job he's done in his career? Like one.
Like the one I was trying to think of was the Coach of the Year job that he did Orlando. But I was trying to think of that team, and it was just
they lose 22 straight with T-Mac?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I think he's good at getting through the grind of the 82-game season, but once you get past that point, that's really where he drops off hard.
So, Guardy 3, we were talking about this before, and I'll say the same thing I said before. When you get in a 7-game series with Doc Rivers as your head coach, those teams might be more talented, and they might go up 3-1, or they might go up 3-2, or they might go up 2-0. But when the the other team has a good coach and they make an adjustment to what you're doing, there's never a counterpunch from Doc Rivers. There hasn't been one in his whole career. And I think one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen in the history of basketball, like when I watched the Eagles fall apart down the stretch, I said that's one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen in the history of football. One of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen in the history of basketball was the 3-1 Clippers team that lost to the Nuggets, because the Nuggets just kept running the same play. They ran pick and roll through Nikola the entire game. And then and the Clippers had no answer. And their answer was to put Kawhi Leonard on Nikola Jokic. That was their answer.
That was one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen.
And I remember watching that series in the bubble and be like, they really have no adjustment to it. Like, I've never seen like a team that just has no answer. And Denver, credit to Mike Malone and credit to what they did that series, they just kept going to the well. They're like, all right, well, you can't stop this. I'm going to keep running it. I think Doc sucks. And the last thing I wanted to bring up was, no one wants to admit this because he's been the darling of the NBA because he played for one franchise his whole career. But Dame is a loser. And I'm sorry if that sounds like a little harsh. The guy's a loser. He's been a loser his whole career.
I'm not a Dame guy, so you keep going. You keep going.
Well, it was easy to blame Portland because everybody just looked at Portland and was like, oh, they were so dysfunctional. It's like Portland had pretty decent teams some of those years, and they came up short because they were so Dame-centric, and Dame is limited in what he can do. He's an undersized guard. Yes, I get it. He can shoot the three, but it's like, if that's not falling for you, is he a guy who's going to get in the paint, get to the line 15, 16 times? No. He's going to continue to shoot from the outside and give you nothing defensively.
One of the most wild things you'll ever see in your entire life is me and Cottrell get in these debates all the time about Chris Paul or Dame Lillard. And he's like, well, Chris Paul's had all these teams around him and Dame Lillard hasn't. And that's his argument, right? But I want you to go to 2019, right? 2019 to 2020. And I want you to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder roster that Chris Paul took to the playoffs. And I want you to look at the roster of the Portland Trailblazers that was in that same conference that were the 8th seed. They were 35 and 39. And I want you to ask yourself, would you rather had that Portland Trailblazers roster, or would you rather?
It's not close. It's not close. You would take the what Chris Paul did. I remember saying this, and I remember Cottrell saying, like, you thought that was a signature moment. And I was like, you're looking in terms of did he lead Oklahoma City to the championship? And I'm saying when Chris Paul was traded to the Thunder, that was an afterthought. That team was supposed to not make the playoffs. That team was supposed to be a lottery team, and he took that team to the playoffs. That was a signature performance, in my opinion. That was the performance, and I know it wasn't a deep playoff run, but you got to look at bigger picture. If you replace Chris Paul
with Houston,
right? But if you replace Chris Paul with Damian Lillard, they don't make the playoffs.
No, not at all.
Chris Paul is just – I don't know if there really ever a debate with Paul and Lillard, because I always thought that was an easy one. It's easily Chris Paul, and it's really not all that close. The thing with Dame is I always knew that he couldn't be the guy on a championship team. What really intrigued me about Milwaukee is I thought he could be a guy on a championship team.
I got you.
So I think when we get to the playoffs, it'll be really interesting because I still think he can be a key piece to the championship team. But I thought it was pretty apparent, like his entire time in Portland, that he can't carry a team. He can't be the number one option on your team and expect to make a really deep title run. He had that one run in 2019 to the Western Conference Finals, but besides that, they've fallen short every time of expectations.
You look at that 2019-2020 Blazers roster. It was C.J. McCollum, Dame Lillard. That was the year they had Hassan Whiteside, who was their starting center. Carmelo Anthony played for them. Anthony Simons, Gary Trent, Kent Bazemore. Like, they all played over 1,000 minutes. So, like, let's not pretend that that team did not have talent. And they were the 8th seed. And you look at the the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that was SGA's rookie year. Like, it was Chris Paul, SGA, and a bag of Doritos. Like, that's what it was. And, like, I get in these debates all the time, and even if you look at Team USA, the last World Championships, Dame Lillard was 100% a detriment to that team. He was one of the worst players on the court. And I don't dislike or hate Dame, but I just got to say what things are. And I think him going to Milwaukee, you took a winner out of Milwaukee and Drew Holiday, who's won everywhere he's went, and put a loser there. And Dame Lillard, I know loser is like a really bad word to use. Like, I don't want to call him a loser. He's obviously not a loser. He made the NBA. But you're adding another loser in Doc Rivers, a guy that's coached over-talented, over-qualified teams his entire career. He was, Kyle, you're a Celtics fan. If before the Big 3 year, were there not talks, 2006, 2007, were there not talks about firing Doc Rivers because he was underachieving?
Yeah.
They wanted to
absolutely.
fire him. They had Garnett and they had Ray Allen. They win a championship with the most talented roster in the NBA. And then they didn't win another one.
Nope.
And then he goes down to the Clippers, and he's got a talented roster all around him. 2-3-1 blown leads. Goes to Philadelphia. You got Harden, Maxey, Embiid. Nick Nurse is doing more with less in Philadelphia. My man's getting coached circles around. Sorry to interrupt, guys.
No,
you're good.
no, I love it.
Always enjoy doing shows with you, Gene. I will say this though, and as like crazy as this might sound, I still don't mind the Drew Holiday for Dame Lillard trade. When it came to the Bucks, the biggest issue we had in the playoffs last year and throughout this entire Drew, Giannis, Middleton tenure is half-court offense. Our half-court offense blew. And we saw it in clutch time. Our clutch time half-court offense fell apart last year against Miami. It's a huge reason we got knocked out. Because Chris Middleton, he can't be a second option anymore. Drew Holiday, if you ask him to be a second option, he tries too hard and his numbers tank. Pretty much put everything square on the shoulders of Giannis. And he's great, but he's not necessarily great in the half court at all times. So he's limited what he can do there. So I think that Dame gave us a boost that we needed to really thrive in the half court, which shows I think we're the best team. We're right up there in half court offense. Now I just think we got to kind of trade a couple of these extra pieces and see if we can bring in a couple defenders. So when it comes to Dame for Drew, I love Drew and I love everything he did, but I can see why we did it, and I honestly wouldn't change anything. I'd still do the trade if it's given a second chance.
Okay, so the question that remains for the Milwaukee Bucks is what you traded to generate half-court offense worth it for what you gave up in half-court defense?
Yeah, I think it will be. The thing with the Bucks is we can get stops in spurts. So I think it's possible they've shown the ability to get stops. For a while we were top 10 in clutch time defense because we can put together like 5-6 minutes of solid defense. So I think if we can bring that out enough in the playoffs, get stops when we really need it, like down the stretch when it matters, then I think we could still be fine. I just think that we just jumped the shark with this coaching change.
Okay. Thank you guys for having me on. I wanted to stop in and just say hi to you guys in the debate.
Appreciate you, Gene.
Yeah, appreciate
Love
you.
Gene.
Love y'all.
That was Mr. Gene of Wire to Wire. If y'all don't check out his shows on Wednesday, you should. You're missing out. But yeah, that's kind of my feelings on Doc. I don't like it. I really was pulling for Kenny Atkinson in Golden State, but it is what it is. Can't do anything about it. Go Doc Rivers! Woohoo!
Right. You're a Bucks fan. Let the season play out how it plays out. Yeah. I was thinking it just hit me now. I wish I had said it when Gene was on. What does Doc do well? And it just hit me what he does well. When he has good players, and I'm talking about in regards to what he does in the regular season, he doesn't mess it up. He gets out the way, right? That's what he does. When he had
Pretty
those
much, yeah.
stacked when he had those stacked Celtics teams, you already had leadership when you had Garnett and Pierce and Allen. Rondo was a young player, but Rondo was an old soul. Rondo was ready to go. Like Doc's job was not to get in the way. And to his credit, he didn't get in the way. Like Kyle pointed out, their defensive schemes, that wasn't from the mind of Doc Rivers. That was Tibbs. So what Doc did really well was stay out the way, if I can give him credit for something. Again, I don't think he's a lousy coach, but when you get in a 7-game series, at some point, adjustments, matchups, those things come down to your coaching ability to change things up. That has never been a Doc Rivers strength. That's not a secret. That's just a fact. And so, all you Bucks fans listening up out there, I say that to say this: there's a chance.
I'm not gonna lie. When it comes to Doc Rivers and blown 3-1 leads, the Nuggets was an incredible meltdown. I don't think anything can top the stunt that he pulled in with the Clippers too. Do y'all remember 2016, that Game 6, when he had a 19-point lead like in the third quarter, and then just proceeded to get cooked by Josh Smith and Corey Brewer for the next 15
Oh,
minutes?
wait a minute. That was it game 6 or 7?
Yeah, it's game 6
and Harden is on the bench. Harden is on the bench. They got Josh Smith, who's a known bricklayer, and suddenly Josh Smith can't miss. Corey Brewer, who's played on 100 teams, is unguardable. I watched that, and as it's playing out, you're sitting there and you're like, call a timeout. Doc, do something. And it was amazing to watch. They came back and ran him so bad, they didn't even put Harden back in the game. They didn't need him.
No, yeah, those three are like Trevor Ariza all of a sudden shot 100% from the corners. It felt like that dude wasn't missing either. Honestly, if it was a favorite Doc Rivers choke moment, it might be that game, just because watching Josh Smith just start hitting pull-up threes was incredible.
The more we talk about this, you know what? Doc's got a lot of courage coming back for some more. A lot of courage.
Well, Bucks apparently gave him 40 million reasons to come back.
That was the courage.
Yeah.
Well, some other big things happened this week in the NBA, of course. And Joel Embiid, we'll start with him since, he actually won the game. He went for 70 and 18. This is right after Pop said, I'm a hammer his ass. Well, that didn't work out well. Joel broke Wilt Chamberlain's all-time record for points in a game for Philly. So, congratulations to Joel Embiid. And what did y'all think of this masterclass of a performance?
Did it against the right team. Like, they had no answer for anything that Joel Embiid wanted to do. This is kind of the scary thing about Joel Embiid and the head scratching thing, because he has performances like this in him, and it's just like, how is it that he gets into the playoffs sometimes and he seems to shrink in the moment when we know he's such a talented player? Because look, as a Celtics fan, I still can't understand how Al Horford is a guy who hurts him so much in playoff series. If I see the two of them, you would look at them and say, Embiid should eat Al Horford for lunch easily. But for some reason, Al Horford just makes it difficult on him. So it's all nice and good to see this performance from Embiid, but he still has to put together in the playoffs. And that's always going to be the thing with him. We'll see these and people will be like, oh, okay, he had a great moment. But if he follows it up and this year gets bounced early, okay, that was nice.
I will say that this season he's been more aggressive. He's been more consistent about being aggressive than in any season I've ever seen him in. Like, too many times he'll fall in love with the three. What I respect and love about him is his mid-range game is as good as anybody's. Like, I'm talking guards, forwards. Like I've said it before. He has a shooting touch that a lot of shooting guards wish they had. That's how terrific a shooter he is. Um, if we want to just get into the playoffs, yes. In the bigger picture, all that really matters to me, like I'm going to celebrate and appreciate what he's doing in this regular season, which, by the way, I think he's much better this year as an MVP candidate than he was last year. Like he's even better this year. Clearly, to me, best player in the league right now. But we don't judge the greats, the ones that want to get into that conversation on just what they do in the regular season. If Joel Embiid and the Sixers have a great regular season and they get into the postseason and they get knocked out in the first or second round, it is a failed season. He's got to at least get them to a conference finals. At least get them to a conference finals, because that would show growth. That would say that you are going in the right trajectory. You're going the right way. He's got to take a step forward, not just as a leader, but as a leader in the clubhouse, in the locker room. I'm looking at the development of Maxey. I love the steadiness of Tobias Harris. What Nick Nurse is doing, to what Gene said, with less talent, they became better. And I know a lot of us could say, well, they got rid of James Harden, so they got better by default. You could make that case. Sometimes it really is as simple as chemistry and maybe the camaraderie in the locker room. Maybe they wasn't feeling James like that. But I'm looking at the Sixers, and I look at them as a team, like right now, they're one of the 3 best teams in the East. But if they made a big move to give them some scoring power off their bench, because I think if they have a weakness that I can look at right away is they have no firepower coming off their bench. I think if they get a guy that can get you buckets coming off the bench to go with what they already have, that would make them more than just a threat. They to me, that would make them the favorites to come out of the East. Like, I love the Celtics, and don't get me wrong, Drew Holiday is one of my favorite players. So whenever you say good things about Drew, it makes me smile. I think the Celtics are kind of in a similar situation. When I look at their top 5, I love their top 5. I think it's the best. I think their top 5 is the best starting 5 in the NBA. But when I look at their bench, I think they need more. They don't have to have a superstar, but they need a guy a reliable guy that can get you 15, 16 off the bench. I'm not confident in Pritchard. I'm not confident in the rest of those guys coming off that bench. Not in a 7-game series when guys can adjust and lock in on them. I think they need to add another scorer, or add another impact player. If you don't want to add another scorer, I mentioned this name before. I know the Celtics have the trade assets and the picks to make it happen. He's on a losing team. I'm telling you, people underestimate the value, and I'm saying it again, Nicholas Claxton, that guy.
I would love that move.
Yeah, no, I agree. When it comes to Joel Embiid, everyone's going to judge what he does in the playoffs, but man, he was certainly special in San Antonio. And that's the thing with the Sixers team is they don't have a lot of scoring off the bench. But man, that defense around Maxey and Embiid, they've really surrounded them with a nice defense. You got Melton, Batum, Robert Covington has shown he can still provide some solid minutes if needed. I think the Nets haven't done great in surrounding him with like bench scoring, but they've given him like really solid bench role players. So I'll give the bench some credit in that regard. I do have an interesting stat, and this is something I pulled off yesterday off Twitter, and this almost kind of goes to show the whole playoff issue. So this year, Joel Embiid stats this season against teams below 500. He's averaging 47, 12, and 6. We'll round up to 12 to 13 because it's 12.9 rebounds, and he's averaging 6 assists, 2 blocks, 74% true shooting. Teams above 500, he's averaging 25 points a game, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 blocks, 54% true shooting. So I think those are still great numbers if we look at teams against 500. If you're giving me 25, 10, and 5, I will take that. I think my only concern slightly is the shooting percentages dropping by that harshly by 20 points. That might be alarming, but overall, I think Joel Embiid's special, and he's showing it, and I think this is the year he finally has his playoff breakthrough.
You really? Let me ask you this. So, in that breakdown, that it says he scores 25 and 10 versus the above 500 teams. Does it tell you what the Sixers' record are versus above 500 teams?
It did not. It just this one's just pulling Joel Embiid stats against
I'm
him.
I'm only saying that because Maxi's had more than his share of 40-point games. Like Maxi's been a monster this year, and the good thing about Embiid this year too that I think is a sign of maturity is when Maxi's on and Embiid knows he's on, Embiid will take a step back and let Maxi go. He'll let Maxi go. A lot of stars wouldn't do that. There is a reason why he's averaging 6 assists this game is because he's become more of a playmaker. He's sharing the ball better than he ever has this season, and I think that has a lot to do with the emergence of Maxi, with the steadiness of a Nick Nurse. So, look, I think big picture, I don't think the numbers lie, but I think we can all agree like we're looking at Embiid. We want to see what you do in the postseason. I'm looking at Jason Tatum, and I'm saying everything is lined up. You have a terrific starting five. I like Joe Mazzulla as a coach. I know he's young, and I would tell this to people. Don't forget, he's not just young. Joe Mazzulla is literally learning on the job. Like he is learning on the job, and I give Brad Stevens and company credit for having the patience to let him continue to learn on the job. I don't want to go back to this again. Unlike Milwaukee, that couldn't wait to get Adrian Griffin the hell up out of there. I'm just saying, man, the organizations can make or break you. Boston, to me, I think they're right there, but I think this is a big year for Jason Tatum because we consider him a superstar. He's got a terrific sidekick in Jaylen Brown. I think Porzingis has been everything I thought he would be for them. I think Drew has come in and shined in the way that Drew can. Maybe it's understated because you can look at his scoring numbers and go, well, Drew's only giving you about 13 a year. But Drew's taking a step back because Derek White is ascending. And that's just being a great teammate. Drew saying, look at you. You having a career year. And I think he's content with being the fifth option. A lot of guys would never go into a locker room and go, I'm good with being the fifth option if it means we have a legit shot to win a title. That team to me looks like a team that they don't just enjoy playing with each other, they genuinely like each other. I think that matters going forward.
Yeah. Well, I did look up the over 500. I mean, it didn't have a breakdown like the Embiid scoring, but as a whole, the Sixers are 14 and 10 against teams over 500.
Okay, so 4 games above. All right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with Joel Embiid, at least, even if his scoring drops against teams 500, he'll always be an elite shot blocker. He'll always have that defensive presence. Unlike Karl Anthony Towns, who gave you 62 points and maybe the most unimpressive 62-point game I've seen in a while. Now, let me kind of explain what I mean by that. Scoring 62 is impressive regardless. Great, he got his buckets. He had 44 in the first half. Nice 18 in the second half. Great game offensively. Do you know how bad you have to play defensively to score, to have 58 points going into the final few minutes and get benched? He was on the bench and it was justified. That's how poor his defense was. It wasn't anything complicated either. It is, okay, Brandon Miller's shooting right in front of me. I should probably put a hand up. Not Karl Anthony Towns. You just kind of stared at him. He played what I call that DeAndre Jordan defense. Stare at you and hope you miss. Miles Bridges shooting right in front of me. I'm just going to stare at him. Maybe he'll miss. Maybe he'll be nice. No? Okay. Like, there's a reason that Chris Finch said that performance was abysmal and disgusting defensively. And he's correct. Karl Anthony Towns, people said it was crazy that he got benched. But with that performance, he deserved it. His plus minus for the game, 0. And he scored 62 and you're just neutral. Like, I don't know. I saw people complaining, and I think the benching was actually justified down the stretch because he was a traffic cone.
Let me ask you guys a question with Karl Anthony Towns. Do you think that, and I know the Timberwolves have been very good this season, but do you think that in a way he's kind of holding them back? that we know that Ant is the best player. He's established himself as the best player. But I'm looking at Towns, and a lot of people thought he was a star. And maybe he's been somewhat of a star, but I think we know for sure he can never be a number one on a title contender. He's not that guy. He doesn't have the mentality to be that guy. We always talk a lot about basketball IQ. I would say the Cat has one of the lower basketball IQs. I don't think there's no doubt about that. But I'm saying big picture. You can't move Gobert. You can't give Gobert away for nothing. Like you can't move him. He's not going anywhere. So he's there. You've got Ant. You've got Jalen McDaniels. You've got Nas Reed, who's probably one of the better backup centers, if not the best backup center in basketball. I guess what I'm saying is, could you? Because when you look at them overall, I'm just talking about top to bottom. There's a big gap. There's Ant. Towns gives you about 20, 21. And I think then the next guy is Nas Reed at about 13 a game. And I think it's odd that 3 of your top 4 scorers are centers, right? They with that, you know what I'm saying? They need more diversity on the wings. They need another a scoring small forward. I guess my point is, could you not move Cat and bring in a wing and maybe another guy to build out your roster, and that way you could bring in Nas Reed. Nas Reed could play the role of Cat to some degree because he shoots the 3 now too. He shoots the 3 too. So you could do some of the same things with him and Gobert you did with Cat. And I think your team would be deeper. Your rotations would be deeper and better if you had another guy that could drop 20 on the perimeter. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because, I saw Minnesota play the Celtics, and they had Karl Anthony Towns trying to guard Jason Tatum. And you can probably figure how well that went, especially, in clutch time where Tatum wasn't calling for screens or anything. He'd back it up, force Karl Anthony Towns to come out at him, put a dribble move on him, and get by him and go to the rim. So if you're going to have him and Gobert on the court together, look, Minnesota's going to have to understand that against some teams, you can forget about it defensively. And it was already an issue going into the season where we wondered, pick and roll defense, if you put those 2, would they know what to do? And now it's to the point where wings are just pulling Cat out, doing like isolation and just taking him off the dribble. And he doesn't move quick laterally. He gambles way too much and uses his body, which gets him into foul trouble, which is also an issue that he has. And at that point, he's just giving you a net negative because offensively, he doesn't really take advantage of that opportunity on the offensive end because he likes to play on the perimeter.
Right.
So I'm with you, Mo. I think the Timberwolves have to seriously think about moving him for a wing player, but they might be looking at their record and say, "Oh, we'll be fine." But come playoff time, they're going to get exposed by top teams in the West.
That's what I'm thinking of. Right. Look, I get it. You can make it through the regular season, but in the playoffs, when the floor shrinks and it becomes more about half court execution, they're going to have spacing issues again, like they did last year. Look, here's the crazy thing. Towns shoots the ball as well as a lot of shooting guards himself, but he's not consistent. When he should post up, he doesn't post up. He wants to dance outside by the 3-point line. Like I've heard this term before, but it is real. Some guys can be talented, but not necessarily winning players. I don't think Cat is a winning player. And maybe in another role on another team, I actually think the perfect role for him is not the number 2, but the number 3. On a title contender, Cat should be your number 3. That's what I believe. And look, Minnesota might just have to find out the hard way, and I think they will, because if they match up with, say, the defending champions, the Nuggets are going to pick them apart in the postseason. They will dissect them in the postseason. If they match up against Oklahoma City, even though Oklahoma City is the younger, less experienced team, Oklahoma City right now, when they're all right, when Shea's right, when Jalen Williams is right, when you've got Chet doing his thing, don't forget Lou Dort, reliable 3-point shooter. What Getty could do, the versatility. What is the guy? Isaiah Joe is one of the best 3-point shooters in all the league. Like, That team, it's crazy to say, right? Because they always talk about how Oklahoma City has 1,000 picks. I would use those picks. I don't want to move none of my guys, but I want to entice somebody else and go out and get another bench scorer, make myself that much deeper, because they have enough picks to where they can make a trade and they don't have to lose none of their core guys. That's how many picks they have.
Yeah, if I think of the Thunder and the Wolves matched up in the playoffs, we know exactly what would happen. Yeah, you set a screen with Jalen Williams, force Cat onto SGA. All right, clear out, ISO. Or even Jalen Williams himself has shown the ability to put the ball on the floor. So he's
or even Chet. Or even Chet. Chet can put the ball on the floor. Like, I think Chet could blow by Cat. And Gobert. Look, you could go back and forth. Cat is the more versatile of the two because he's a lot more skilled offensively. But I think that if you put gifted wings around Gobert, you can hide him. He can still help you with the rebounding. He can still be a deterrent at the rim. And he's never anybody's first, second, or third option offensively, right? He kind of gets his offense like through the flow of the game. He's going to give you 13, 14 a game just on working hard. I just think that sometimes you got to be open to change when you realize, look at the landscape of the league right now. Oklahoma City, they're coming. I'm looking at like when we look at some of these older teams like the Lakers, like the Suns, you can give any one of those older teams, I guess you would call it a puncher's chance. They have a puncher's chance, but they're all older teams. If the Phoenix Suns don't win it all this year, and they're not going to, then you're coming back next year, and KD is going to be 36, and he will be 37 by the end of next season. Like, it doesn't get better. It eventually, slowly, gradually gets worse. And Phoenix, for sure, of all these teams we're talking about, they don't have any bench. They got no bench. They got those three dudes. Grayson Allen is a solid role player. Nurkic can be serviceable at times. But after that, they have nothing. And they have no picks to go out and get better because they gave away all their picks, making all these trades, bringing in Bill, bringing in KD. So I don't know how they get better. I think they are what they are. If they go into the playoffs, you're going to say if they get hot, they could give you a really great series. Do I think Phoenix could beat Oklahoma City in a series? I don't. Do I think they could beat the Nuggets? I don't. I don't even think they could beat the Timberwolves in a series if Anthony Edwards is aggressive because there's no matchup for him in the entire series. So I just think sometimes we have to be realistic about the ceiling for some of these teams. I have high expectations for Oklahoma City. I think that the Timberwolves could be similar, but I think they have to be bold enough to go out, make a move, and get Anthony Edwards a running mate that he can develop with, somebody that's close to his age that he can develop with going forward.
Yeah, if I have one complaint about the Timberwolves and Karl Anthony Towns, you talk about low IQ. Can somebody stop trying to tell him to pass it to Gobert in the low post? I think I saw half their turnovers, them trying to run high-low action and passing it to Gobert, and Gobert having the worst hands ever. Just, and it's a turnover.
Right.
And of
But
course,
if you pass it down to him, what's he going to do? What post move does he have? He wouldn't know what to do with it. So, yeah,
right.
I'm there
right.
with you.
Right. You pass it to Gobert in the post, and what ends up happening is it's either a turnover or he ends up stumbling and trying to pass it back out because he has no post moves. If he's not catching a rim run or a lob, he's not scoring.
Yeah, that's fair. And then from one All-Star to another, obviously we've had the All-Stars were just announced a couple hours ago. So let's see, I believe this is it. Here it is. Here's your Western Conference starters and here's your Eastern Conference starters. Guys, do you have any complaints about any of the starters?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at
Dame for me is one. Go ahead, Mo. Sorry.
No, I'm just curious. Who would you replace Dame with? Like in your head, who do you have in your head?
I thought it had to be Brunson.
Thank you.
Brunson seemed like the guy for me.
All right. We're on the same page. I think Brunson should be in the starting lineup as well. I have no problem, obviously, with Tatum, Giannis, and B. That's a given. Tyrese Halliburton, before he was injured, was one of the best players in the basketball. He literally was carrying the Pacers. I think Dame, and it's not that Dame is having a bad season. I just think that Brunson is literally, I don't care what people say about Randall. If you know basketball, the best player on the New York Knicks is Jalen Brunson.
Absolutely.
I would even argue that Damian Lillard should be third when it comes to guards, because I'd also put Donovan Mitchell over him this year.
Another guy I think should get some love. I think Tyrese Maxey has been balling.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been balling. He should get some more love. I think that's the only guy that I have a beef with is Dame, and I'm not saying he won't make the All-Star team. I just didn't think he should be a starter. And in the Western Conference, look, it's tough to argue, but I'm gonna argue. And I know people would disagree with me because you can always look at numbers. I'm not the biggest Luka guy, and I'm not telling you he can't score and he can't put up numbers. But like most ball dominant players, all ball dominant players I know put up numbers because they have control of the ball all the damn time. That's what ball dominant players do. So he's always going to have 28, 30 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. He got the ball in his hands. Like another guy I know in LA, but I don't want to talk about him. I think you could have really considered giving Anthony Edwards some love, not because he has a more wow factor numbers wise than Luka, because his team is at the top of the conference versus where Luka's team is. And I think that there used to be a time when they said we rewarded guys who played on teams that win. Well, right now, Anthony Edwards is the best player on the team that's tied for the best record in the conference. I'm just saying that's my opinion. I'm not killing people who pick Luka. Because you can always throw out numbers. Is Luka cut and dry a better basketball player than Anthony Edwards?
That's valid.
Ooh, that's I think as an all-around player, I'd give the advantage to Anthony Edwards. I do think that Luka is a much better playmaker than Anthony Edwards. Scoring, I don't really think there's that huge of a difference between the two, but it's close. It's close. I might kind of swing to Luka a little bit there, but that's just because I think that there's a massive gap in playmaking, and I think it's just slightly bigger than that massive gap in defense.
I won't argue that Luka's a very good passer. He is. He's a gifted passer. The scoring thing is kind of deceptive. One, because Anthony Edwards doesn't take as many shots as Luka, so Luka's going to score more. And my guess is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, Luka's probably top 3 in free throw attempts per game because nobody hunts for free throws more than Luka. So, look, I'm not saying he's not a gifted or a great player. I'm just saying it's kind of like a football argument, right? And I have it with people of my own fan base. It's no secret I'm a 49ers fan. What people tell me is the most important player in the San Francisco 49ers is Deebo Samuels. And what I tell them is that is not true. I know you like Deebo, and I won't argue with you if you make a case that Deebo's maybe their third best football player. He is. But in his individual, let's say, position, he's not the best receiver. Brandon Ayuk is the best receiver. Like I told people before the season started, Deebo's not a great receiver. He's a great football player. There is a difference. He's not a great receiver. He's not a great running back. He's a good running back. He's a great football player, but he's not a better running back than C-Mac. He just isn't. That's just a fact. And I'm just saying that to say this. You can put up a lot of numbers, and people will always shine and look at numbers, but then I'll ask you a plain question. Is player A better basketball player than player B? Anthony Edwards is such of a talent. It's not just what he can do offensively. Anthony Edwards is already showing you signs that he can lock up on defense. Luka ain't never locked up on defense, and he never will. Luka ain't locking nobody down. So to me, I understand the numbers, but the better basketball player is Anthony Edwards.
No, I got you.
I
That's
agree.
fair enough.
That's my rant for the day. That's it.
I agree.
Well,
Also, can Jamal Murray make the All-Star team finally? Like, we got to end that
Oh,
this year.
I'm with you 100%.
Jamal Murray's going to be like the new age Mike Conley, where he's like a very good player, but just not good enough to crack that top like All-Star list. Kind of like how Mike Conley. Everyone's like, we got to make him an All-Star. We got to make him. Well, he was up here, but unfortunately, the guards are in the West are up here. They're just slightly more talented.
You know what's crazy though? The postseason comes around, and Jamal Murray ends up eating up all the other guards that are above him in the postseason.
Oh,
Like,
it's
and everybody that's above him, he eats them alive in the postseason. Jamal Murray is built for the postseason, and he's unique, and I think that he's a star that keeps getting overlooked. I understand he's in a unique position because he's playing with the guy that's either the best player or the second best player in the whole NBA. So by default, you're the number two, even though I think he's a great player on his own.
I think Jamal Murray almost reminds me at times of he copies the Jimmy Butler style of playing, where he's still talented and he'll do good during the regular season, but it's almost like he's just saving it all for when the postseason hits. He just cranks it up to another level. So I agree. I think he is just as talented at every guard in the West, but when you already have Luka, Shea, Steph, Anthony Edwards, like there's just so much guard talent in the West. It's really hard to nitpick who are you knocking out.
Yeah, I get that, but man, look again. Where are the Nuggets at in the West? Are they second or third? Or are they tied? Like they have to be right there. They are the defending champions. I think Jamal Murray is giving you 21, 22 points a game, around 6 assists, shooting a good percentage. Like he should get his flowers. He's deserving of that. I understand some of these other guys are hell of a talent. I'm not hating. I think Shea is deserving. Look, LeBron doing what he's doing this late into his career, I'm not complaining. He's deserving. KD's deserving. The Joker's deserving. It's difficult. Look, we're talking about how Jamal Murray should be on the All-Star team. You can make a case, so should Book, right? And I'm not even a big Devin Booker fan, but Book could be on the All-Star team. We all know what I just said about Anthony Edwards being on the All-Star team. And Kyle made a great point early in the show. I give it another year. This time next season, we're going to be saying, like, I think Jalen Williams should be on the All-Star team. That's how good that guy's going to be.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's just going to get worse.
That's valid. I think Jalen Williams definitely is gonna. I think he's gonna be an All-Star at some point. Maybe he'll unseat the guy in our last topic, which is Kevin Durant, who is wondering, guys, why don't we have him in the GOAT conversation? So Katie decided to ask everybody, why shouldn't I be in that? What haven't I done? So I guess my question to you guys is, why isn't KD in the GOAT conversation?
I feel like there's probably a few reasons. The burner account could be one. I just feel like Kevin Durant turns a lot of people off because as great of a player he is, he kind of lacks that leadership quality that I feel like makes people want to make that argument for him. And maybe it's something as simple as if he can take this Phoenix team, which if you look at their roster, it just seems like it's such a mess. If he takes this Phoenix team and wins a ring, you know what? He'd probably change a lot of people's perspective. But I feel like the way it ended in Golden State, where I guess reportedly it was like, because he wasn't getting the same shine as Steph, he became jealous or whatever and moved on. Then you look at the whole Brooklyn situation, which was a complete mess. And like, who else did you have to put that on? That falls on KD. KD chose that destination and then had to get up out of there. So now he's in Phoenix. And even earlier this season, they were talking about he was unhappy in Phoenix. So he's a guy who just, he's not a leader. He needs all these great players around him, supposedly, in order for him to do well. And when you're looking around today's NBA and like his generation, it's like, we're not going to think of you because we could think of LeBron, you got Steph, you already have previous with Jordan and guys like that. And if you're going to compare him to like Jordan or Kobe, those guys have a competitive edge. And I mean, Gene put in the comments, a lot of KD's personality comes across as soft, mentally weak. And I think that's what hurts him. So I'm never going to think of him in the GOAT conversation. But hey, if he wants to wonder why, it's probably that. He just comes across as a weak player. Skilled, but weak.
What do you think? What do you think, Mo? Do you agree or disagree? Why isn't KD in the GOAT conversation to you?
So I agree with everything Kyle said. Everything Kyle said was on point. But I would cut to the chase this way. Bro, you can't be in the GOAT conversation if you're not even in the top 10 and you're not a top 10 player. Like, you got to actually get in the top 10, get in the room to be in the conversation for the GOAT. He's not even in that room. Like, if you're not top 10, why are you even asking that? You know damn well you're not a top 10 all-time player. So just on that alone, like, in the conversation, if you're not in the top 10, why would we have this conversation? What can be true is you don't deserve to be in the GOAT conversation. At the same time, he's one of the all-time great players, one of the all-time great scorers. Kyle pointed out something that I think is the biggest reason. Kevin Durant has never been a leader. And I know at times people have used well, KD just wants to hoop. He doesn't want the responsibility. Right, because you're not a leader. You're not a leader. And if you want to give me that, well, when he played with Steph, you can argue he was the best player on the team. I think he was. But he wasn't the leader of the team. And the argument that without KD, that they was not going to win a title, well, Steph blew that up a couple of years ago because he won again without KD. KD is yet to win without Steph. And unlike KD, Steph is making a strong case to be in the top 10. Like, if we're just going on individual talent, you would say that KD has more talent maybe overall than Steph. But Steph is going to be a top 10 player when it's all said and done. And KD's not. And I don't think Steph can be in the GOAT conversation. So if he's not in the GOAT conversation and he's at least top 10, you have nowhere to go. Like, I heard Gilbert Arenas, again, make one of his clickbait takes. Gilbert Arenas said if you took Kobe and you took Jordan and you took KD and they all went into a gym and you stripped away finals MVPs, finals, scoring titles, all the accolades that everybody had, and they were just dudes playing a tournament of one-on-one, that he said nobody would bet against Kevin Durant. And I said I would. I'd bet that in a game of one-on-one, I think Kobe and Jordan would both bust his ass in a game of one-on-one. LeBron isn't even a more natural scorer, but in a game of one-on-one, I think LeBron would bust his ass. Because here's the thing. In one-on-one, if you've ever played one-on-one, one, it's a much more physical game. You don't get touch calls. Guys get up in you. Two, at some point, you got to guard somebody. Who KD stopping? He's not a great defender. He's not stopping anybody. So that argument is terrible. I think the mistake guys like Gilbert Arenas and others make is they get caught up in skill and talent, and they think because a guy might be more skilled than another guy, by default, that makes them a better basketball player. That's not how that works. KD is probably one of the most talented players of all time, and he's still not a top 10 all-time player. There is a mental toughness. There's a thing that we argue about on the blacktop. It's supposed to be something in your chest, and KD is lacking in both of those departments. It's why he's not a top 10 player, and it's why it's laughable that he's wondering why he's not in the GOAT conversation. Like, there's an old saying, like, my favorite player was your favorite player's favorite player. What all-time great player is going, KD's my favorite player? That's not how that works. People are looking at Steph Curry. More guys revere Steph Curry than they do Kevin Durant. And I think that says a lot about Kevin Durant himself. I witnessed, maybe this was 2 years ago, Kyle, Your Celtics play his Nets in the first round of the playoffs. And Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum dug into him. And people are like, well, you can't guard him. They got into him, took away any space he could have. He did not know how to handle it. I think he shot like 40% or less for the series because the refs let them play. That particular series was probably as close to 90s style basketball I've seen in a long time, and Kevin Durant wasn't ready for that. I'm just saying there's a softness to him that a lot of people don't talk about, but I have no problem mentioning. You can't have a mental weakness and be an all-time great player. Show me Magic Johnson's mental weakness, Larry Bird's mental weakness, Michael Jordan, LeBron. When it all mattered, when they're at their very, very best, Kobe, they had a toughness to them that even when they weren't shooting the ball well, they were still coming at you. I think KD has this thing in him where there's a point in time where he'll stop fighting, will he'll submit. I think KD's got a little bit of quit in him. That's just my opinion.
I think matching up KD against like Michael and Kobe in a game on one-on-one sounds terrible because those are the two most notorious trash talkers of all time. I have no doubt they would get in his head and throw him off his game. I think KD, if you describe him, it almost sounds very similar to how people almost describe, let's see, extremely talented individual, but couldn't get it done in the playoffs. I think Wilt Chamberlain is a more talented player than Kevin Durant. I think he's higher ranked all time. And I've seen people argue that he isn't a top 10 player. I don't know if you can argue that someone like Wilt Chamberlain, for example, isn't a top 10 player and then try to argue that KD is, because I think Wilt was just that special of a talent. So when it comes to KD in particular, I think you guys pretty much hit on all the big points. He's got that a little bit of quit in him, unfortunately. We saw it. We've seen it in-game in that Boston Celtics series. We even saw it in the decision. You have a chance to really write your legacy, come back at the team that beat you the next year. Instead, you joined them. Was it the right career move for Kevin Durant? Absolutely. It did great wonders for him. It really boosted his career. He got his rings. So, good for him. I'm not faulting him for doing that.
I didn't kill him for that, even though I thought it was weak. I didn't kill him for it.
Yeah, but now if I'm trying to debate if he's a top 10 player, that's where it really kills him. He's like, all right, this dude, he does have that little bit of quit in him. He ran from the grind. He joined Golden State. That's what a lot of people say. You say you can't be stopped. Well, what happened when you got into him? You got physical with him. He doesn't react well to physical contact. He doesn't like it. You can tell when you get into space when he's trying to shoot, he absolutely hates it. So I think at the end of the day, Kevin Durant is a top 10 or like 11 to 16 player of all time. I think he's in that tier. He's an all-time great. Give the man his flowers. But Kevin Durant, unless he leads Phoenix to a title this year and maybe next year, he's not going to be touching the top 10 before he retires.
He needs to do something that big, like you and Kyle said. He needs to win at least another title and another Finals MVP. Look, the thing about the guys that are in that particular conversation, they've all got multiple regular season MVPs, multiple Finals MVPs, multiple Finals wins. That is not KD's resume. He does have multiple Finals MVPs, but he's got one regular season MVP, and he left. To me, I don't understand the jealousy of Steph. To me, had he stayed in Golden State, yes, I get it. Steph would always be more beloved, but you don't think that Golden State fan base would have embraced him and loved him if he helped them win 2 more titles? They would have loved him. They would have loved him. And that would have elevated his individual profile. The stuff that he's done since leaving Golden State, I think, actually diminishes his individual profile. Unless he goes on an incredible run that I don't foresee, and he wins a title this year and a title next year. The idea that he's going to ever be in that conversation, that the only guy that's going to buy that is the guy that runs his burner account.
And Gilbert Arenas.
Yeah. And Gilbert Arenas, right?
It's funny
those
too.
rabbit ears. Sorry, bro.
I was just gonna say the funny part is I think they would have had a chance for I think they would have had a chance for another title in 2021 with all the injuries and the way everything broke out. Even without Clay, Steph, and KD probably would still win the West. Add in Draymond, like that's a big three that still wins the West, and they still win in 2022. So KD stays there. We're talking about Kevin Durant with 4 rings and maybe an extra finals MVP or 2. So that's
At
a
worst,
conversation.
4 rings and at worst, 3 finals MVPs? Like, that is a completely different conversation. But KD's also one of those guys that's got rabbit ears. And so if he hears, well, this is Steph's team, this is Steph's culture, you need to go somewhere else and you need to win. He listened to all those people that said that. Dude, if you had just stayed where you were a made man, period. Because when he went to Golden State, he inherited the most pressure any player could inherit. Like, you go to a team that already won a title without you, with Steph, Clay, Draymond, you've got Kerr there, they had a bench, and you don't win a title, he was going to get killed. And what he did was he delivered on all that. He not only won a title, he was the best player in back-to-back championship seasons. Why leave?
That's that as well. But yeah, I think the bunny ears played into everybody calling him cupcake and all that stuff, and it clearly affected him. And I think the Brooklyn stint, he could have done a lot for his legacy in Brooklyn, because he would have had to have been the leader of that team. Because you're not turning your team over to Kyrie Irving at that point, and you're definitely not turning it over to James Harden. So if he found a way to make that work, we would be talking about Kevin Durant much differently today. And what did it do? It blew up as soon as it got together. So that's just who KD is at this point.
Oh, yep. Don't take away from his greatness, but also don't call him the GOAT.
Yep.
Well, that is all that we have for tonight. You guys want to add in anything before we go?
No, I had a blast. Always good to chop it up with Kyle. Great to have you back, Kyle. You know you got an open invitation anytime, man. Anytime. Great. Appreciate you, Gene, for stepping in and voicing your opinion. Always welcome, fam. I'm good.
Yeah, say Kyle, got anything?
No, I mean, I'd say the same thing. Like, I love coming on here. I'll try to come on here every once in a while because I do love talking NBA with you guys. And yeah, just enjoying the rest of this season. Like I said, love the show, so I'm happy to come on anytime.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Gene, Jory, Larkin, Skills So Faded. Appreciate you tuning in. Everybody who tuned in on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. Gene, you're always welcome to come on. Appreciate it.
Always.
Jory, maybe we can get you on sometime too. So for everybody listening and watching or watching the replay, we appreciate you. And please enjoy the rest of your night.